What?
Is that one going to be fitting?
Watch
those front row injuries. Is this yours?
First of all, everybody, we don't have a microphone, so we will have to shout at you, so please listen carefully and don't be singing too loudly or anything like that while we're demonstrating. By way of an introduction, my name is Matthew Malcolm, this is Ross Bailey. We're both instructors at Medieval Combat Group, we're based in Belfast, and at the minute we're the only HEMA group in Northern Ireland. So what we want to do for you is try to give you an introduction into HEMA, Historic European Martial Arts, which is growing in popularity both in the UK and in America and in Europe. First of all, what we want to do is we want to give you something that you may be used to seeing, something that you'll see in cinema, something that you'll see in stage combat groups. And what we want to do is we want to educate you on the differences between historical fencing and what you will see in stage combat. We apologise if this isn't as smooth as possible, it will be narrated, and also this isn't what we practice.
Okay, so the first thing you're probably used to seeing is people using swords that they weigh an absolute ton. And then, big silly bangs goes in, which is great for talking to each other, but not very good for swordsmanship. And then, silliness like this, especially from Star Wars. And then the best idea ever, turn your sword upside down.
Massive parries, as wide as you can get, and then missing the opportunity to finish your opponent whenever you're very close in. And another dramatic struggle, followed by somebody being impaled and guided down while you have a conversation with them.
It's like sword fighting therapy or something.
That, or, I could have staggered around the stage for another 5 minutes, but it's not the best demo, man.
So what we want to make our time useful for now is to show you what a historic swordsman would do in these particular circumstances. So I'll begin by giving you one of the misconceptions, and Ross is kindly going to narrate and break each one.
So the first one, the big close-in bind.
I'll do the first. Oh, okay, yeah.
We'll do the bind first.
Okay.
That's the nicer one. So big close-in bind. We're in this close. I don't actually need my other hand.
I'm pushing as hard as I can.
It's against my body, and my arm's not going anywhere. So I've got a couple of options. I can tell him he's being silly. Take a sword away from him. And kill him.
Give him back the sword.
I could just change the angle of the bind a little bit and get leverage and kill it. Or, this is great, except if I just step back. Now we're being careful with this, but Matt's not wearing a mask. But as you can see, that's not the best position he could be in. And if I just step forward, he's in trouble.
Another thing we'd like to point out is historical weapons. These are pretty close to historical weight and dimensions. These weigh approximately 1.5 kilos, which is an average historical weight for one of these weapons. So they are very manageable and they're not too heavy.
In fact, to put it in context, if you take the average rapier that a musketeer would use, and you're all used to seeing them being thrown around all over the place, this is the same weight.
Oh my god.
Now, if I'm to make a very, very wide attack at Ross, I'm going to use it really heavily and move it. It's pretty effective. Alternatively, if we meet in together and Ross bangs, and I decide to cut him from behind, I'm going to get a pretty hefty strike on the back. So, we'll get into the exact details of the art that we practice very shortly, but first of all we want to tell you a little bit more about HEMA. What is HEMA? HEMA is Historic European Martial Arts. It's the modern study of historical fencing techniques. So we go to source material, we read source material, and we try and recreate it in a way that is martially accurate. What that means is, as you can see from our guard, we need modern safety equipment to do so. The techniques that we're going to carry out are done with intent and they're aimed at the body, which means that if Ross isn't wearing this, I won't have a drilling partner for very long. So in the interest of me continuing to practice, we need to stay safe. not to mention health and safety. Whenever I say to somebody, oh, what do you do in your spare time? And I say, I practice and teach the longsword, people think that I mean one of three things. They think that I mean reenactment, they think I mean stage combat, or they think I mean LARP. I don't want to say anything bad about any of these because they all have their place, but the differences are, if we're going to do something like reenactment, you're getting a sense of history through the attire that they wear, through the way that they present themselves, and the things that they show you in living history events. However, what we're aiming for is accuracy in our martial technique. That means that reenactors have to compromise because of safety. So for example, we'll wear fencing masks over here instead of open-faced helmets. We're not stage combat. The idea of stage combat is to make something that's dramatic and entertaining and something that's aesthetically pleasing to watch, whereas a lot of these techniques are very subtle and they're over very quickly and it doesn't make great watching. So there's no character development through somebody very quickly killing somebody else, which obviously doesn't tailor itself to film and cinema. And with LARP, where somebody is creating a game or a fantasy idea around this kind of period, again, we're trying to create accurate techniques as they were used, but it is very much an interpretive art as well. So to tell you a little bit about the sources, we study the German longsword. Yeah, it's roasting in here, and these are effectively duvets that we're wearing, so give us a wee bit of a break if we sweat or we're out of breath. We learn the German longsword. It's derived from a man called Johannes Lichtenauer, somewhere in around 1350 or the middle of the 1300s. However, the first text that we can accurately use is by a priest called Hanke Doorbringer, known as Codex Doorbringer. This is from 1389. In this, not only does he detail cryptic verses that Johannes Lichtenauer created, he also details glosses which describe how these cryptic verses can be used. Johannes Lichtenauer made the verses cryptic so that somebody that wasn't taught by him wasn't able to use the system, and so that you could only use it if you were taught by him. We don't know if Doorbringer was a second or third generation student. In addition to that, we use later sources such as Sigmund Ringegg in the mid-1400s, and Ross has a very keen interest in Johannes Leykirchner, who teaches the Messer. Also said within Doorbringer is that all of the longsword comes from the Messer, so the Messer can be considered as the fundamental weapon of the medieval system. To continue dispelling myths, we're now going to give you a few demonstrations of some of the key techniques in the system. So first of all, most people think of a longsword and they think of a big cutting weapon, and yes, cuts are very important. So for example, Ross is going to make a cut against me, bang, there's a good cut in. Aim somewhere between 30 and 45 degrees. However, we have two other methods of attack. For example, if Ross brings up a low guard, and I'm able to cover, I can then make a move in towards his arms, and I can slice from here. So a slice is one of the other attacks. Or alternatively, as is more prevalent in later styles, there's always the thrust.
Oh my.
So those are the three fundamental techniques. However, people think of medieval combat as being brutish and having absolutely no art into it, but they analysed and broke down the fight into three elements: the vor, the nach, and the indus. Vor meaning before, nach meaning after, and indus meaning simultaneously. So for example, when we're in the fight, Ross can take the initiative and take the vor, and he'll make a cut in against me. That leaves me very much in the nach. So he's taken the before, I'm in the after, and I have to try and parry him to move out. However, if we take this back a notch and begin the fight again, and Ross comes back down into plough, as he shifts to try to attack me, he begins to take the vor. But what I can do is I can react at that instant and make a cut against him in the indus, so that if he does try and strike in, as he intends, I'm very much kept safe. So these three principles detail a path through a fight from the start to the beginning, and hopefully the end where you're still alive. Next we've got the mechanics of the sword. So obviously we don't have Newton's laws of physics in and around 1389, but what we do have is a keen understanding of the sword. We originally wanted to get somebody to demonstrate with this, but it won't be practical. Ross and I are going to strike in together. We've made a bind now. As you can see, if we both apply force, the swords are bending, but we can resist each other. However, if I now move down Ross's sword, I can't push him no matter what I do. However, if Ross then drops his point and I move up to grab him here, while he resists me, I can pretty much walk around his body. So what this gives us is an understanding that the torque applied across the sword is very important to the art, and there's a huge subtlety in the position of the blades against one another. The next thing that we can talk about, which I've forgotten, we've done the weak and the strong, is binding and winding, binding and winding, as they were called. The bind is when we come together. The advantage of the bind is, as you can see, our blades are in contact. That means for a short while I'm actually relatively safe, because I know Ross's blade can't really go anywhere except in contact with mine. It means that I can feel the pressure shifts through his sword. So if Ross slightly releases his pressure, I can feel that and move in and do whatever technique I need. And by the same token, if he applies pressure, I know that I can move and do something else to counteract the shift in pressure. This idea of fooling gives us the ability to read what an opponent is doing through the sword, through the vibrations down the blade. The next thing is wind, and if we come into a bind, as I've described to you, there's weak and strong. The weak up here and the strong down here. We can move the blade or wind the blade in such a way as to make use of the torque, so that we can leave ourselves in a beneficial place where one person is safe and the other person is in, well, grave peril, to be quite honest. The other and possibly the most important thing about the art, which we'll also get on to say in a minute, is that unlike other systems you may be used to seeing, all strikes should be directed towards the body. So for example, just to prep, Ross is going to make a strike that's aimed at my sword. As he does that, you can see it's very, very easy for me to simply drop and move in, or even if I want to humour him, I could do something like move to here. Either way, he's leaving himself open by not directing it towards my body. However, as soon as he attacks in towards my body, I can't do that because he's going to hit me in the face or the arms or wherever. And I don't particularly like this. Oh, thank you. So that's a brief introduction to some of the principles. What we're going to do now is we're going to elaborate on 4 of the 5 master strikes. The master strikes in the system are special strikes, not designed by Liesenauer, but that he advocates the use of to maintain safety within swordsmanship. The 4 that we're going to talk about is the Zornhau, or the Wrath Strike, the Zwerchhau, or the Crosswise Strike, which you will have seen featured earlier in the demonstration, the Schielhau, which actually also you'll have seen earlier at the very beginning, and also the Krumpfhau. So the Zornhau, or Wrath Strike, is a very simple strike from the right shoulder. However, where before Ross does anything, we're stopping with the point at the opponent. This means that if Ross wants to advance, he can't, because he's going to come straight through my point. And if he decides to strike in, first of all, I'm going to move out to the side to cover my body, but the sword is coming down towards him with the point on line. That means that if I'm out of range and I haven't hit him, I can just shoot the point forward, or I can do the winding or the winding that we've described earlier, and it leaves us in a very good position. And in some of the plays that we're going to do later, we're also going to show you a longer version of the play starting from the Zornhau. Next is the Zwerchhau. We had described it if Ross starts in plough and he moves up the Wontag, I can move in and strike with Zwerchhau, and if he follows through with the strike, I'm left safe. However, because this is an interpretive thing, it doesn't always, we can't necessarily say that's the only way, and in fact we could establish the bind first and then strike round to one side, and if that is unsuccessful, strike round to the other side. The Schielhau, or glancing strike, is said so because it glances down the blade. If Ross takes up a guard plough, as you can see, if I want to strike him normally, it's pretty difficult because his point's already online. So what I want to do is I want to first keep myself safe. It's called fencing for a reason, it's defense, and I don't want to die. So whenever I see his point, I can strike in, glance down his blade, and make a cut. You'll note from this position my hand's completely safe, and I've struck him. And I also have a good degree of stability here, and in fact if I bind up close, I can really control him from there too. This can also be struck against a strike from above. If Ross strikes, I can simply strike in, and I'm in a good position. From here, I could move across, or I could sink the point and move in. And the last one we definitely wanted to include because this is a contradiction to the system. This is one where we actually do strike to the sword, but not exclusively. In some martial arts, you'll see something where a strike comes in along the centre line to the head. Bad position to be in. However, if I move to the side, Ross's blade carries on through and I can do whatever I want. I can have a handshake and a cup of tea with him. However, In the German system, we strike between 30 and 45 degrees. If I do that, Ross is still going to hit me, and this isn't so conducive to a tea party. So what instead I want to do is put in a contingency plan. When he strikes, I strike the crimp valve down, clearing the blade and moving out, and from there I can either move up and slice the hands, or I can sink the point and keep myself safe. So hopefully that's given you a good introduction to the complexity of the art. What we're going to do now is, we're going to put our fencing masks on, we're going to give you 4 plays, which are strings of attacks, kind of like kata in Eastern martial arts. We're going to give you them slow first, so that you can hopefully see what we're doing, and then we'll speed them up between. And if we have time after that, we'll show you some very slow free play, so you can see hopefully what it's all about.
Can we have a bet, see who wins?
How are we doing?
You probably haven't got time to play.
Oh, fantastic.
But you've got time, no, you haven't got time to do this stuff.
Not
Not slowly.
How long have we got left? Sword half play. Okay. Search and play. Ring and play. Rest.
Kick his ass.
Would that not hurt?
It wasn't quite hard. Is that us, or do you want another little bit? One more.
This was developed for the messer, so single hand about your length. But I can use it with longsword.
Got a big strike down to the head.
So a big strike down to the head. The other thing is longswords weren't actually really sharp, you can grab them. Direct to his face, but I don't want to kill him. I think I'll take him alive. And he's locked up with his own sword.
Well, I